I was born on 1930, that is almost in the earlier part of the last century, almost a little over 83 years back. But then it's nothing strange for a Homo sapien to come on the earth, because we are classified earlier as Homo sapiens, which means a human type of body which can think, and a later period was a greater thinker. But now this whole terminology has been modified to anatomically modern human, and this anatomically modern human has come into existence just about 1 lakh years back. But if you see the planet Earth age, it was formed 4,600 million years back, and then there was no life at all till 1,000 years, then certain formation of DNA, and then a bacteria started to form. And this bacteria was there for another 2,000 to 3,000 years, creating atmosphere of oxygen in the air, which was not having oxygen earlier at all. And then the evolution of the life as such has just sprung about only 500 million years back. And when that is evolution means 500 years, that means out of 4,600 million years of the earth history, the life forms are there only for 500 million years. And in that 500 million years, the human form in the type of ape was only for 4 million years. That is called Australopithecus by the anthropologists. And then later on, that is just an erect animal. It is not having intelligence, which was having basic knowledge and intelligence to survive. But then it was there like that for nearly several lakhs of years. And only about 10,000 years back, we have the real civilization started on the planet, when the Homo sapien started to live on land with farming as a main component. Earlier it used to be a hunter-gatherer. Now this 10,000 years back history of the anatomically modern human is very important. This comes out of anatomically modern human about 1 lakh years existence. 1 lakh years existence in the planet life of 4,600 million years is such a negligible fraction. If we count the whole life on earth period as one day, we are now in the last few seconds. So therefore, we are not for entirely for any longer period on this planet. And this 1 lakh years of the anatomically modern human has revolutionized the whole earth. They started migrating around 60,000 to 70,000 years back from Africa. So we all owe our existence to the Africans. And when they started migrating from Africa to Central Asia, and then to India, and then to west towards Europe and other parts of the world, they even went to Alaska through the Bering Strait, which is now a sea. Earlier times it was a land mass. So they traveled through America, north and then south. They occupied the whole world. But then when they occupied, they felt they are the masters, because they survived all the climate changes. And when they have occupied Europe, they already found a Neanderthal type of species, which was in existence since 250,000 years back, much earlier to this anatomically modern human. And those people did not survive because of the weather changes. They could not adjust, and in fact they completely got eliminated, or they were no more about 30,000 years back. That whole race has extinguished, and it is the anatomically modern human which has taken over the whole area of Europe. Similarly, Peking man in the Central Asia, and that species also did not survive, it became extinct. Similarly, Java man. So like that, these anatomically modern humans have occupied the whole world, and all this is known to us only recently. That is, when the Human Genome Project was known. Genome Project is the genetic sequencing of the DNA, and the Human Genome Project results were out around 2005. Then only they came to know that we are the same as the Africans, and there is not much of a genetic difference between the Indians, Europeans, Americans, Chinese and Africans. The genetic difference is stated to be something like just similar to the genetic differences that would be there in children who are born to the same parents. That is a type of genetic difference. Of course, facial and then other features, they are the genes that differentiate from one race to the other race. Those, excepting for those things, all others are the same. So therefore, we come from that species of anatomically modern humans, and there is nothing great, and I was one of those species. Then when you trace the whole intelligence of the evolution, in the human intelligence in the evolution, we find that about 10,000 years back, the intelligence was by far more than 1 lakh years back when this race has evolved. But then this 10,000 years has seen a lot of change, especially from the starting point of farming, which is 10,000 years back, to the Ramayana period, I think 5,000 years back. There is a lot of intelligence developing and languages developing, and all that has happened. Then after the Ramayana period, say Vedic period, that was around 3,500 years back, several other thoughts have come up, and then a lot of knowledge has sprung, and our people could find several new things about 3,005 years back. But then if you see about 2,000 years back, our own scientists like Aryabhatta, Bhaskaracharya, Varahamihira, these people have contributed much knowledge on the astrophysics as well as on the various geological things, especially Varahamihira on groundwater, and several new knowledges have emerged. But then from then to the Industrial Revolution time, the knowledge growth was there. But in the Industrial Revolution time, the knowledge growth was very, very remarkable. And then during the past 100 years, it is phenomenal. If you see the past 30 years, that is exponential. And the same trend is going to be there for the next 100 years. Now we have discovered several new things on the astrophysics, on the nuclear physics, and various branches of sciences. It is not the end of it. It is going to be further improved, and new things are going to be found, and several discoveries would be made during the subsequent periods of several decades or centuries. So therefore, the knowledge as such is a growth factor, and the human intelligence also is a growth factor. For anybody to think the ultimate knowledge was already given during the Vedic time, it's not correct. They have done their best to give the knowledge available, and they have analyzed, and they have also done certain research following the scientific principles, what they call methods of science. That was about Vedic time and earlier. So they did a very remarkable thing. But they have to imagine certain things because they didn't have gadgetry of instruments. They could only observe, whatever they could observe, only they could verify again repeatedly every year, and then come to a sort of understanding and establish a phenomenon. But then to say that their knowledge is ultimate and we are not having adequate knowledge to refute it is not correct. For example, in behavioral science, in certain amount of values of life, human qualities, all those things they have said, whatever they said, they are correct even till today. But whatever they have said about astrophysics, they are terribly modified. They were calculating various things based on certain observations of planets and stars. And they thought Earth is center of the universe and that sun is rotating around the Earth, like various Europeans also thought, and wherever the civilization was there in the world, they also thought in the same manner because that's what they have observed. But later on it was known that it is not so, and they could even with that knowledge could work out the solar eclipse, could work out the lunar eclipse with precision, because that was based upon observation and adopting methods of science at that point of knowledge time. And this was very successful because they have followed the various principles like statistical correlation, like verification from peer groups, that is the people who study, and then recurrence of the events according to their prediction. So these are all the scientific principles. Experimentation, all these things are scientific principles they followed, but their base knowledge was very small. So therefore their results may coincide, but then certain other things will not tally. As I was mentioning, the civilized people in the Vedic times have followed the methods of science, and to the extent of the knowledge they know, they concluded several phenomena and they have enunciated certain principles. But then to the present day knowledge, it is not valid because the knowledge base is so wide now, it's several times, in fact perhaps a few lakh times more than the knowledge base at the Vedic times. For example, in the astrology they have predicted, they have considered Earth as the center of the universe and sun rotating around Earth, and in that Navagraha, what they call Graha Balam, in that Navagraha, this Earth is not a Graha. Earth is center of the universe. Sun is a Graha, which we all know is not a Graha, it is a star which gives all the energy, and there is a nuclear fusion reaction going on, and every second 5 million tons of hydrogen is converted into helium to give the energy, that is 5 million tons is lost per second. And this is all the phenomenon we know now. And then they have calculated the grahas as Rahu and Ketu. They are just shadows of sun, earth and moon. So these are the shadows. So these shadows are there for any object. When there is a light and there is an object, the object will always give a shadow as long as the light is there. The shadow is there for Mercury, the shadow is there for Venus, Jupiter and all the other planets also. So this shadow is a part of the system of light and an object. So therefore it is not a graha by itself. But these two things are considered as grahas. But what is vital beyond Jupiter is Saturn. They could see up to Saturn. They could not see beyond Saturn because they don't have instruments and it is not visible to the naked eye. Beyond Saturn, very big planets are there which are several times bigger than Earth, perhaps about 50 times to 100 times bigger than Earth. And that is, you have Uranus and Neptune. So these are the two planets which are not there at all. So therefore, whatever they could see, they have worked out wonders. what they could not see, we can't expect them to work out wonders. But then those things are all available today. And if anybody says it is Graha Bala, it has no meaning. But then traditionally we are following it, and all our Shastras also say that Muhurtams are fixed based on the Graha Bala and based on the Nakshatra in which the person is born. All these things are worked out as earlier, is being followed still now. Even though we know that sun is not moving and we are all moving around sun, but then we calculated all those rasis on the basis of sun movement. In the zodiac, sun moves, that is in the ecliptic, in 1 month one rasi, another month another rasi, like that sun moves. This is how apparently it looks like, but then it's all not correct to the present day knowledge. But still, if you say he is born in so and so nakshatra, and then therefore he is having these qualities of lion, these qualities of Gemini, and things like that, Aquarius. So therefore we attribute certain shapes connecting certain stars, and then think that the sun is going through that from one rasi to another rasi, and then give the importance to that date of birth in that particular rasi, and then work out horoscopes. So the whole basis is wrong, and there is no need to follow horoscope at all, because it is all based on fictitious assumptions as per the today's knowledge. They were not fictitious then, at that time, in that period of Vedic times. That was not fictitious, that they were done in a scientific manner only. I want to caution again, they are scientists, real scientists. They are not imagining anything which is not there. What they could see, they have calculated, but they are no more valid with the present day knowledge. This is the point that I want to make. So therefore, to follow Graha Bala or to follow horoscope is on a fictitious background which has no basis. And to think that the entire life career depends upon that is again a wrong assumption, and it is there in certain civilizations. For example, this sort of Rasi and all that is there in the Western civilization also. It is there in America, Europe, and so many other civilizations. So therefore, it's nothing new for the Indian civilization. The humanity as such was thinking on those lines based on the knowledge at that time. But then it is not the true knowledge as gauged now, as found now. So therefore, when we have to work out things, it should be more logical and rational. And our constitution, fortunately, says certain wise things. That is, it has to encourage and development of scientific thinking, humanism, and logical reasoning, and reform. So therefore, these are all the words used in the Constitution to encourage logical reasoning, reform, scientific temper, and humanism. So therefore, this has got to be followed even according to the Constitution. For example, to quote individuals, Jawaharlal Nehru was not a scientist. He was a lawyer, historian, and things like that. But then he has scientific temper. Then his daughter, Indira Gandhi, she studied science, but she did not exhibit scientific temper. So this is a peculiar situation. Even among our present day scientists, we see some having scientific temper and some not having scientific temper. So they believe, that means they have blind beliefs on certain things which are against scientific temper. So we have scientists, no doubt, they are no doubt good scientists because they are practicing science. They are working in science, but they don't have the temper, scientific temper. These two things are different. So this is the importance, and generally people will say, what is it, sir, you are saying like this, but so and so eminent scientist, he is following this, he is also doing like this. So is it not valid today? So for such questions, this is the answer. Scientific temper is not there. He may be practicing science, he may be working in these scientific disciplines, but he doesn't have the scientific temper to understand things in a holistic way. So this is the case of several individuals who think strongly about the various things pertaining to astrology and similarly Vastu. For example, Vastu during the Aryabhatta time and the later period of time, they have evolved. Varahamihira has contributed quite a lot. But then, these things have come into the discipline of science, what we call architecture. Long back, all the scientific principles of Vastu or any other branch have already come into the scientific disciplines, either architecture or any other branch of science. Now, what did not enter into architecture was the beliefs. Those beliefs cannot be explained, it is only individual belief. So, one believes in one thing, another believes in another thing. So, it doesn't uniformly is not valid for all persons. So, these beliefs again vary from person to person. So, such beliefs don't enter into architecture. So, this is the way how things have got to be viewed. And then people will say, we have so much of discovery going on nuclear physics, that CERN, C-E-R-N, that is a Large Hadron Collider. So, it has found several results, including the God's particle, what they call it as Higgs boson. But then many people I find asking, they are going to the Big Bang period. Big Bang period, what is there before Big Bang period? So, somebody has got to explain. So, you say it is all available in science, but then you can't explain certain things. But here we have to understand that we have not come to an end of all the research. We are in a particular stage of research. Further research for the next decades or further centuries may lead to an answer to that, because we are going step by step. And for example, we have the theory on quantum mechanics. Nobody believed that, including Einstein never believed that. He said God will not play dice because it relies more on the probability theory. Probability and random occurrence and this sort of a thing is not logical, and he used to say God does not play dice, he doesn't gamble. So, but then what happened later on, he also has to agree for the various things related to quantum physics, because it is working out in practice in various applications. So, similarly, it has now been proved on a firm footing that several other theories are coming true. Now, what is not known is about dark matter, dark energy, which totally comprise of nearly 96% of the entire universe, and we don't see that. And only 4% of the universe we see that in the shape of stars, planets, clouds, dust and all that. So, the balance 96% we don't notice, and it's called dark energy. So, the further research is to investigate what this dark energy, because the effects of dark energy are felt. That is, the expansion of the universe is due to dark energy. Gravitational pull is there, but then expansion is still happening, and that is attributed to the dark energy. So, several more things like that have got to be discovered, and out of that is the supersymmetry, string theory, and so many other things pertaining to the nuclear physics. Similarly, in the astrophysics side, you have got so many things found out, including the black holes, pulsars, that is a neutron star which rotates at a very fast rate, and so many other wonders in the universe are being discovered with different gadgetries. We have now space telescopes. That means they are not on the land, they are in the space, they are rotating, and that means we can have a clear visibility of the universe without the atmosphere blurring it. So, in that space telescope, we have got microwave background radiation measurement, X-ray, that is called Chandra telescope, gamma ray telescope. Like that, different types of modern and improved telescopes are coming. As they go on giving us readings and observations for a long period, we will come to know more and more of the astrophysics side. So, this is the way how scientific disciplines are developing, not only in these two branches like astrophysics and nuclear physics, but in all branches, including cellular and molecular biology. Recently, Dr. Venkatraman is given Nobel Prize for working out a ribosome, a part in the cell, and he analyzed it, he sequenced it, And like that, several things are coming to knowledge, and new discoveries are being made in different disciplines. It could be on medical side. We are seeing every day some discovery or the other on the medical side. They always blame, no, we have this Ayurveda, no, we have this other types of cures established long time back, our wise people. They are wise and their cures also are good. But it has to develop further from that day knowledge. For example, in Ayurveda, at that time, they never knew diseases can be caused by bacteria, because bacteria was known only in the recent past. So people used to die out of plague in Europe because they never knew that it is due to bacteria and there is a cure for bacterial infections. Those cures have come up later. So therefore, there was no cure at all in any one of the earlier medicines, whatever name you call them, because the knowledge was limited. To that knowledge available, their medicines were working. But beyond that, the medicines don't work, their medicines don't work. But give a feeling of a placebo effect. That means some people get cured, some people don't get cured, and the faith also cures in some cases. So such types of things are going on. So we cannot rest our oars, or we cannot keep content with what has been done and always gloat about the past and our superiors. They are there earlier and they are the masters of all knowledge. That type of understanding we should not have. They did their best to develop in a scientific manner, and we are further developing in a scientific manner, and the good of that and the good of the modern things can be taken. But to always say that that is the best is not correct, because any branch of medicine is a growing factor. Even the medical knowledge, modern knowledge, that is what they call modern medicine, which is given the name of allopathy. Any modern medicine is a subject which gets improved day to day based upon the research conducted. But then at times they may say the earlier findings are wrong. So that means they are open in their thinking and they correct the earlier findings with the latest findings, and they have to be approved by the peer group, and then they have to be tested on the real life models, that is the humanity, after testing on animals. And then when it is successful, then only it can be introduced in the market. And the side effects also will be tested. Then after that, they will approve it. So these are all the factors go with the modern medicine. Any ancient medicine, either we call it pranic healing, Reiki, or faith curing, you have got 11 types which the Indian Medical Council has analyzed. So any one of those things, including homeopathy, if any one of those things are proved according to the medical science, what they call it is randomized double-blind placebo tests. If they work on that basis, random sample, significantly big significant sample, and control group with placebo, and then with the medicine. So there is a technique for that. So if that gets approved in that process, and 95% of the patients who are given medicine are cured, then it enters into acceptable domain. Then it can be tested further. So any one of the ancient medicines or alternative medicines, if they go through this process of test and it gets proved, it automatically enters into modern medicine. Modern medicine is nothing very strange. Any one of the earlier medicines, if they are proved, it automatically enters into the modern medicine. Okay. I would now like to talk to you on certain incidents that have happened during my service in the career with the government of Andhra Pradesh and in other bodies. Primarily, when I was posted to work in the Rollapart project, the orders were received by me when I was still in the college. Our results for the BE degree were not yet announced, and without announcing the results of the engineering college, the government had appointed our full batch into the service in the government PWD department. And I went to join the Rollapart project, much to the surprise of the people there, because any person posted to Rollapart project, which is in Nellore district, remote areas, they were not going to that project because the hardships were there and there were no facilities. So when they found that a junior engineer is coming to join, they were pleasantly taken by a surprise, because even diploma holders were not joining those posts. So I happened to go there because of a certain amount of training we received in engineering college from our teachers, who inspired us to work for the country, to do certain good things, to deliver goods wherever we are posted, and we have to achieve results. So this was topmost in the mind, and therefore we all went. And when I have gone there to the railway station Ulavapadu, I had to find out the directions how to go to the project. So these were the conditions. Now during that period, it so happened we have to get all the cement required for the project through open the wagons. Open wagons means not in the shape of bags, but in bulk cement. In bulk cement, of course, the wagons are closed, and in that closed wagons, bulk cement were loaded by the factories, and we have to bag it at the railway station. And there is a process we were doing, and after bagging all this cement, nearly 2-3 wagon loads, and we have stacked it, there was a sudden downpour of rain, and the bags will get wet, means they will all get damaged. So there are tarpaulins, but then somebody has to go in the rain and then cover the bags with the tarpaulin. We have a lot of labor force and all that, but nobody was prepared to drench in the rain. Then, because we were trained as Boy Scouts, as sportsmen in the engineering college, you have to lead by being in the front. That was the slogan. So therefore, I jumped into the task and then physically pulled out all the tarpaulins, and I was trying to spread it on the cement bags. And seeing me doing it, all the labor had come, because I was drenching myself and doing all these things. So this was the first experience. Then in the later period of my career, when I was working as the chief engineer, minor irrigation, the chief minister was Mr. N.T. Ramarao, and he was holding minor irrigation directly. It was not given to any minister. So I had to meet him frequently for various purposes of approvals and things like that. So once the first meeting was held, because he called me at about 5 o'clock in the morning. He asked me to come at about 5 o'clock in the morning, because that is usual time he spares for these types of activities. He gets up very early, perhaps at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he is ready for meeting people from 5 o'clock onwards. So when I met him for the first time, in career as well as otherwise also, then he was asking me for opinion on a particular project. Then I was giving my opinion, but it was totally opposite to what he wanted me to give. So he did not like it. So then I said, these are the technical reasons. Then he was not satisfied. These are the financial reasons. These are the administrative reasons. For every reason I am giving out to him, he is getting infuriated, and he is getting more and more angry. And then I did not know what to do. I told him, sir, this is only my opinion based upon the knowledge which I have, but you have the capacity to understand more on various angles. You can decide in whatever manner you like. Then for that he said, అది కాదండి, అధికారులు ప్రభుత్వాన్ని తప్పుదారి పట్టించరాదు. He meant that I am misleading the government, and perhaps I have a stake in misleading the government also, he might have felt. So then I was driven to the wall. So I have to give back. Though it's not my intention to give back, I have to give back to him. I told him, sir, you may blame me for my lack of intelligence, you may blame me for my lack of technical knowledge, or you may blame me for any other reason, but this reason I cannot take, that I am misleading the government. I am on my own. I may lack in capabilities, but I am on my own. So this went to his head, And then he became silent afterwards. Sir Renedy, and then we left. Then afterwards, he called me again after 2 months in some other context. Then the treatment he has given me was so good. I was taken by a surprise. The earlier treatment was so bad, and the present treatment is almost venerating me. He said, you are an asset to our state, and we want your guidance. This type of words he has used. So then, of course, the problem was mentioned and we discussed. Ultimately, he said, Hanumantarao garu meeku edi bagundi anukunte cheseyandi annaru. So this is how he disposed of in the second time. Then there used to be one deputy secretary working with the chief minister. I think his name is Hemachandra Prasad. So I asked him, what is this? At the first instance, I had this treatment, and now this is a sort of a royal treatment he is giving me. He has also given me breakfast and this perugu vada. ఈ పెరుగు కూడా చాలా రుచిగా ఉంటుందని ఆయనే వేసాడు నాకు. So this type of treatment he has given. What is all this? Then he said, lot of things have gone. He made a lot of verifications about you, various manners. So he cited ACB, anti-corruption, and then departmental enquiries, MLAs enquiries, ministers enquiries. So many things he has done, I believe. And then every time he has come up with a superlative version and report. So therefore, this is the change and all that he was mentioning. So that was an interesting episode. Then later on, he reposed so much of confidence in me at the second year of my working as the engineer-in-chief. That's a level above chief engineer. He made me in charge as Commissionerate of Tenders. Commissionerate of Tenders will decide the tenders of 8 engineering departments with the government. It's not only irrigation. And this decision is final. There is no government above this. And I can decide tenders irrespective of the percentage of excess. So it's all left to the Commissionerate to decide quickly, because earlier the tenders were taking, for a decision, it was taking nearly 6 months, because each group tries to influence through the various channels they have, and then it gets bogged down for various other reasons, and therefore it used to take a long time, and works were never grounded. So that is the reason why he constituted the Commissionerate and kept me in charge of this, with the whole powers of government bestowed on the Commissionerate. And when I told this incident and how it is working in the Government of India conferences, they were all taken by a surprise. How is it you have no government above you? Even in the government also, no secretary can really decide. It has to go in circulation, law department, and then financial department, and then to the minister, and then to the chief minister. So no individual is having powers. But here you are having the ultimate powers, and there is no government above you to decide further. And therefore this is a very unique system. So they were all surprised about it. That is the type of confidence he imposed. And even after my retirement, when I am reinstated, he has kept all those portfolios. So this is a very peculiar incident I met with during my service. Then another thing about tribal welfare and the works. Usually sub-plan we will be hearing now. Now the present Chief Minister mentioning that he has provided sub-plan for scheduled tribes and scheduled caste, and it will not be misused and diverted to other sectors. This is what is going on in the government now. So this tribal sub-plan on the irrigation sector was always diverted to some other works, because they had a feeling that the tribals don't know irrigation. What irrigation they do? They have no idea about growing crops with irrigation. They only sow the seeds, and as the crop come up, like what they call it, podu cultivation. This is the only thing they know about it, and they don't know about irrigation. So therefore all my predecessors, they were surrendering these grants. And there was one unique officer by name Mr. S.R. Sankaran. He was the Social Welfare Secretary looking to tribal welfare. He is a great person. He himself has formulated several codes for the tribal welfare, and it is a landmark achievement all India level. and he is very much venerated for his dedication to work. And we were holding meetings for budget for tribal welfare irrigation. So I said, I want the full grant. So he said, can you spend it? Yes. But then next meeting, I said, I want additional grant. You can divert from any other sector for this tribal welfare. Yes, he has provided. But then he was inquiring, how is it possible that you are doing these works? Earlier they were not possible, and they were, grant was being surrendered. Then I said, if you find time, I will show you those works. So it will be very much interesting, because the tribals traditionally were irrigating. This is not known to many. And unless you go to the interior and see about it, you can't see that from the roadside. You have to walk a lot along the streams. They were constructing temporary wood, mud and stone bunds across the perennial streams, what we call salero, small streams. And from there they are diverting through a canal and irrigating 5 acres, 10 acres, 15 acres, like that. All due to their own effort. They have no government grant. It is all their work. So I showed this work to Mr. Shankaran. And what I did was, the temporary bunds across the streams, I made them permanent, because every time the flood comes, it gets washed down, and they have to again build that. Similarly, in the canals also, that used to get washed down during rains. So I had to make some structures on the canals to make it work permanently without any failures. So these are the improvements I have done. And in addition to that, new works also I have taken up. Then during a later meeting in the Secretariat, Mr. Shankaran was commenting before all the other heads of departments and other secretaries. I have been talking about the tribal welfare all these years of my service, but here is a man who has showed me the results and actually doing it. He is not talking about it, he is actually doing it. So this is another pleasant memory which I have from the working in the department. Then this environmental angle I was very seriously pursuing in all my works. I was holding that protection of environment is equally important as that of development. So this slogan no doubt has come up, but this slogan was not there about 30 years back when I was in service. So at that time, there was a unique example which is frequently quoted by the forest officers. Recently, the curator of forest in Nehru Zoological Park was quoting this to me. That incident was, it's a dam alignment, earthen dam, for an irrigation project. Now that dam alignment is the most economical alignment which reduces the cost to the minimum. If you change the alignment upstream or downstream, then the cost increases. But along the dam alignment, I have a big tree. That tree must have been there for nearly 200 years or so, and it is so big. I wanted to save that tree. But then if I want to save the tree, cost of the dam will go up. Now I have to work out an alignment which is moderately comparable and perhaps show it as less costly also, and then abandon the earlier alignment selected. So my superintendent engineer and executive engineers and all the other staff were wondering why I am going around the entire area for the whole day. Like a junior engineer, I walked the whole area and fixed up an alignment and worked out the cost. And it works out slightly lesser than the previous alignment cost. So therefore, I told the people, all my staff, during the construction time, you will find this tree as a great boon. People will come there during summer to take shelter, to take their food. All the labor will be without shelter. So this is the way how it is going to help you apart from the environmental angle. So later on when I went during the construction period, exactly the same words were repeated. They all were very happy about it. This is another incident which even Forest Department quotes. As I was mentioning that when I was posted to Stowe's division in Nagarjuna Sagar Dam, many people felt that my services are being wasted there, and in fact that should be on the dam or some other important work. But then when I joined that division, I felt it is not unimportant at all. It has got its own challenges. The first challenge was there are crores of rupees of lubricating oils which are lying as dead stock, which means there are no transactions in that particular item for a number of years. So it has to move. So if I am able to move that oil and use that oil, then the dead stock will get reduced. So that was a challenging task. And when I took up that challenge, I analyzed the lubricating properties of all oils by convening the meetings with various oil companies. At that time, SVOC one company, Burma Shell was another company, Caltex was another company. And I was discussing with them on the lubricating levels, detergent levels, and the temperature levels at which they function, all those technical details. Then at the last session of discussion, I found one stunning thing, that is about one particular oil is sold under two brands at different rates. The oil is the same. Once we call it as flushing oil, in the other case you are calling the same oil as air cleaner oil. So both are same, but as air cleaner oil it is cheaper, as flushing oil it is very expensive because it flushes the engine of heavy machinery. So this, when I found out, the oil company experts were wondering, sir, the greatest secret of our trade you have unveiled, and where did you work previously, and all that sort of a thing. So therefore, when I told that I am not a mechanical engineer or neither a lubricating engineer, that was a stunning surprise for them. So this is the way how that oil has moved into the various applications. Similarly, about the spare parts. The spare parts of heavy earth-moving equipment, they are also lying as dead stock because the machine pertaining to those particular spare parts is no more being used. So therefore, those things are lying as dead stock. So I want to move those spare parts also, spare parts like bearings, sleeves, pistons, rings, and things like that. So they are all common to various engines. Actually, for a particular make of an engine, under a bin card, it is given a particular number. But then it is not as if it is applicable only for that engine. It is applicable to the various other engines because their manufacturers are common for various heavy earth-moving equipment manufacturing companies. So I analyzed the dimensional analysis, properties and all that, and then worked out the spare parts technology and gave equivalents where these things can go into the other machines. So then this spare parts also started moving. These two things which I have done, as the company representative says, sir, if you leave the job and come out with this knowledge, you will be taken like a hot cake with a high value. They will pay you very high amounts and all that. So these are all the challenges, and then they gave me satisfaction. For example, when they have posted me to investigation division, for example, that investigation division is usually condemned division in the sense that people don't like to go to investigation, they would like to go for execution, and then only the people with less merit are posted to investigation as a convention. Not that it is less meritorious. But then when I went there, I developed new technologies. I developed on water management, on watersheds, and then that attracted ICRISAT. I became their advisor. So therefore, the challenges come up, and then you get satisfied. And that has also was instrumental for my going to East West Center, Hawaii, that investigation division work. So on their invitation, I went there, applying for leave here. So these are all the things which accrue. And then even a division like North Presidency Division, Madras. So what is that division? It's only construction of buildings. But then when I went there, my executive engineer, T.S. Padmanabhayar, he seen my drawings and my designs and calculations for foundation design and all that. Then he immediately picked me up and then said, technical cell he has established in division office, and I have to technically supervise the works of various other subdivisions, other sections, and I have to give the bar bending schedule. He made me into a key post. So whatever thing which I have done there was instrumental for several other things in my line of career. So therefore, any posting where I have gone, though unseemingly it may appear less glamorous, it turned out to be a challenge, and then my contribution, my learning also was there. there's one thing which I would like to share about the persons. As I was inspecting as chief engineer for giving technical sanction for an irrigation project, then I have to make certain inquiries. I have to find out certain technical details. So along with me, the whole staff, including superintending engineer and concerned executive engineer and other staff, were there. So when I was putting questions to them about the project, which is yet to come, I have to give the sanction for that. And the SC was not able to give a reply, because he is not conversant with that. Executive engineer also was not able to give proper replies. The deputy executive engineer, who is below the rank of the chief executive engineer, he is also new to that post, therefore he could not give. There was one junior engineer who was answering all the questions in a very meek manner, because in the department of PWD or irrigation, we have a strong regimental type of behavior, that is like a police department. The chief engineer talks only to the superintending engineer. He doesn't normally talk to a lower level officer. Rarely he talks to executive engineer, and below that he never talks. So therefore these people also don't dare to talk with the chief engineer. So this JE was feeding the executive engineer, and executive engineer was replying me all that. So I thought that circuitous method is not necessary, and I was entertaining a dialogue with the junior engineer. He was able to tell me all the details which I wanted. I was totally satisfied, and I was fully appreciative of his role. Then usually in the afternoon, when we sit under the tree, the hot sun, we take some coconut water. So therefore coconuts are brought and all that, and so I wanted to appreciate the junior engineer then and there itself. I wanted to give him a boost in morale and things like that, but I want to reward him also. But then it was not possible on the site. So what I thought was, let me honor him along with me. So I said, "Are Jai garu lekunda manamanta atti తీసుకుంటాం ఈ కొబ్బరి బొండాలు. So we can't take this coconut water without the JE with us. I know the JE is sitting in the background and sending us these coconuts." So but still I felt I should honor the JE by keeping him in my presence along with the others. So it was an elated moment for the junior engineer, and he was very pleasantly surprised. He goes on talking about it later on also. So this is some simple incident which really encourages the subordinates to do their best. There are some interesting personalities whom I have come across during my service. I would like to tell a few such cases. One is about a contractor. He is a very good contractor. He is known for his good work, and of course his name is Dodla Subba Reddy, and he is work-minded, and he has done several works in the state as well as in the other states. He was doing work in the Tungabhadra project high level canal, where I was also working at that time as executive engineer. Now our chief engineer major irrigation and general, one Mr. Mallareddy, was inspecting the works, and we are in a guest house, and our superintending engineer also was there, and both are seated. And then Mr. Mallareddy has asked for my presence, and therefore I was summoned for explaining certain technical features which I am dealing with. Then there was no chair there for being offered to me, and I was standing. Then one chair was brought, and then at that point of time, Dodla Subba Reddy also was there. He just came in, and then when Mr. Mallareddy was talking to me, his attention was diverted to Dodla Subba Reddy, and he was requesting Dodla Subba Reddy to sit down, and repeatedly he was asking him. Normally Mr. Mallareddy doesn't follow courtesies. He is very curt and dry taskmaster, but a person of no nonsense, a very sincere and honest officer, work-minded, highly disciplined, and he is technically very sound both in theory and practice. So that is the type of person. And he requested, normally he doesn't request any contractor to sit, they have to stand before him. But he gave this honor to Dodla Subba Reddy because He was having so much of influence with the government. He is the kingmaker virtually at that time. And the minister in charge, that is the irrigation and power, there was only one minister, that is A.C. Subba Reddy. And he has got good control over him, and they used to say that he is very influential. And therefore, perhaps Malla Reddy wanted to give him some respect. So when he asked him to sit down, he evaded. Repeatedly he was asking. And then he says, if you don't sit down, we have to stand up. He said, this is the ultimate thing. Then Mr. Dr. Subba Reddy has come out of the room and then he has sent 2 chairs. And after my sitting, then only he sat. Then during the dinner time in the evening, I asked him, why have you made such a big scene there for nothing? And then that could be avoided and all that sort of thing. Then the reply he gave me is the one which strikes. He said was, sir, we know you as junior engineer in Rawalpindi project, the way how you have conducted until today. And if we don't respect an engineer like you, so whom else we have to give a respect? This is the question he said. And then he said another thing which was stunning to me. I may have a lot of influence today. I may have a lot of power. I may influence the minister and I can do several things. But I cannot get one thing done out of you with any one of these influences. So you will work based upon the merits of the case and you will deliver goods and do the justice. So therefore, we have to always give respect to such people. Just because we have influence, we should not look down anyone of your type. So this is the wording which he has uttered. I then felt, this man is a thumb impression contractor. He learned to sign later on. And he has got such worldly wisdom and type of dealing with various people. So these people are rare to come across and he is one such. Another person I would like to mention was this Mr. S.G.K. Reddy. He is a Government of India officer in the telephones department. He was heading the telephones department in Andhra Pradesh with headquarters at Hyderabad called General Manager Telephones. I was at that time executive engineer Kalyani Dam, and I wanted a telephone badly at the Kalyani Dam site because the works have to go on full speed and we have to be in contact with various companies and officials. So therefore, I went and approached my chief engineer and took a letter from the chief engineer addressed to General Manager Telephones for giving a telephone connection on priority, because telephone connections those days are very, very difficult to get. And that too, they had to lay a line for nearly 15 kilometers from Tirupati to get a telephone for Kalyani Dam. So therefore, it's a very difficult task. So then I met him on my own when his office was in Abbots, and I introduced myself, and he asked me to sit down, courtesy extended. Then I explained the importance of the dam, how it is for drinking water supply, and then what difficulties we are facing day and night, how it will be useful and all that. He heard yes. He then took a pad of papers. They are all machine numbered pages. In that machine number, he just puts the date, and he has issued the order to the divisional engineer Nellore. This about this telephone connection has got to be given on priority. Then he just tore it away and then gave it to me. You take it and then the work will be done. Then for record purposes, I have given the chief engineer's letter to him, because on my oral request only he has given that. There is no record in his office. Then he has seen the chief engineer's letter. He said, who is this fellow? Sir, he is my chief engineer. What business has this fellow got to write to me a letter? He should have the courtesy to talk to me at least on phone. You took all the trouble for by coming all the way from Tirupati to here, and you are personally speaking to me and then getting things done. But this fellow sits at Hyderabad in Era Manzil and sends me a letter. Then with vengeance he tore away that letter. He tore away that letter, threw it in the waste paper basket. So this is the way how the functioning of another individual who is very dynamic, sincere, honest, who is really work-minded, and subordinates shiver before him. So that is the type of person he is. While working in the Kalyani Dam, we were given the task of investigating for constructing certain dams on Tirumala hills. They were not there. What was there was only Gogarbam Dam and Papavinasam, Mulle and Anicut. So there was a lot of water required for Tirumala. So therefore they wanted us to investigate for future dams. So I kept a subdivision there at Tirumala, and then we were investigating Kumaradhara Dam, Pasupudhara Dam and Papavinasam Dam. These three dams we were investigating at that time. So when I went to the hills, whenever I went, we were provided accommodation for the staff and a guest house for us and all that. So the chief engineer and at times the TTD EO also were there. So they used to request me, let us go to the temple. So after my reaching there, I said, let me go to the work spot. Then after my return, then if there is time, I will come to the temple. So there was never time available to go to the temple. In all my visits to Tirumala, I could not or I did not go to the temple even once, only except in the very beginning. I went with my wife, and later on I could not find time to go. Then Rangacharya or somebody was there as a chief engineer. He was asking me, "What, sir, don't you believe in God?" I believe in God. What I have learned from Swami Chinmayananda at Nagarsagar Dam, he came for giving discourses. He told me, work is worship. So therefore that still rings in my mind. So I come here for work. So after I finish my work, I go for worshipping. So therefore I am not finding time to worship. So therefore I have given priority to the work. Not that I don't like to come to the temple or any such thing. It will be a necessary thing also for various reasons. But then this is the motto. So then that executive engineer, that chief engineer was stunned. Sir, we have seen several people coming here for this darshan, that darshan, and that influence, this influence and all that. You say the work is first, and then if the work is over, then only the worship. I'd like to tell about the Army Selection Board for their permanent commission in Army services. I have gone for their selection board interviews. That will be for a 4-day period. As we land into Bangalore, we are taken care of and taken to the mess and the hostel where we have to be. And 4 days of tests were there that include physical tests, intelligence tests, psychology, and group tests. So these are all spread over 4 days and 24 batch, a batch of 24 persons. So whoever gets 400 marks out of this, 400 out of 900, 900 is divided like this. Psychology 300, on which we have no role to play. Then 300 for all the intelligence tests, group tests, individual physical tests and all that. And 300 for interview. Now this 900 marks, anybody getting 400 will be medically examined. And if he comes through, then the list goes to headquarters, New Delhi. And this is a 6 months period, and then they test number of batches in a period of 4 days, 1 batch like that. So whoever comes in the first 19 ranking is given posting orders. So during the test, in the very first day, my kneecap has gone in the sense that it crashed in the an accident. That was because I was holding on, whereas all my group fellows have left it. I was holding on alone. So when I was holding on alone, I was dragged by the opposing team. So therefore that incident happened. And then later on with the various first aid things, I could do some physical tests and all that. And in the interview, interestingly, the chief has asked me, on the psychology test, they flash a word for a few seconds. You have to write something about that word in that few seconds. You may not get any reaction at all, you can leave blank. Not that it is answer to a question to answer, correct answer and all that. It depicts your psychology. So several questions he has is listed out, and then he asked me why. I said, the prominent one which I remember is, they have displayed the word defeat. Then immediately you have to write what this. I said, a defeat has to be taken sportingly. Then he picked up that answer, that chief commander, said, sportingly all right, but then do you like defeat? Won't you like to win? Then I gave a reply in my usual way about sports and all that, how we take a defeat, how things go on, and how we improve and all that. So it has to be taken sportingly. After all, we can't win always. So then there was a good discussion on that. Many people write, I don't like defeat or something like that. But you have said it is to be taken sportingly. Then they were very much impressed on the discussion that followed. And then perhaps I must have got very high mark in the interview, because in the All India ranking I was standing number 3. But then I did not join that, because by that time I was already promoted to a gazetted post, which has a little more better salary than the army post. So that was a very interesting thing about the army interview. And several other interviews which I faced, Union Public Service Commission, New Delhi. There also, All India, they have to select 14 assistant engineers. So I was fortunate to get one, because they were giving merit to the persons who are confident about their replies and the clarity with which you reply, and the various technologies that are being tested, they have to satisfy. So that way, this is a very interesting experience about the interviews. Yeah, that choice of engineering has become virtually automatic because it so happened I passed out the high school, that is what they call it as SSLC, in my 14th year. Due to various circumstances, I had to advance the classes. There was a jump of 2 years in the school days, and then again a jump in the middle school. So therefore, I could pass out at 14 the SLC. So the minimum age required for medical seat was 16 years. But engineering college, there is no such minimum. So there was, when I applied for engineering college, they gave me the government engineering college. So it has become virtually an automatic choice. Otherwise, I had to wait for 2 years to get qualified to apply for medical seat. Otherwise, I would have preferred only medical. Then it was not possible. Then the engineering side of it I chosen. So I applied my mind to engineering. And interestingly, though I was the college general captain, playing all the games, and also I received the shield for best all-rounder for games, sports and studies together, because I was in the top of the class in the studies also. There was certain peculiar circumstances which I had to face. One is about cricket. Though I was a college wicket-keeping batsman for in cricket, I refused to play for the college for inter-college tournaments. Then the principal has to give an order. I was the college general captain, and then still I refused. That is because I will be losing my classes. If I go out to MR College, Vijayanagaram to play, I will be losing my precious time, and I have to spend in the college and learn things which I can't cope with later on. 1 hour of theories told to us in the class is equal to 1 or 2 days of self-preparation. This is what I realized. So therefore, I did not want to miss the classes at all, and I refused to go for playing this cricket. Another thing is about this cricket, we have to waste a lot of time during the daytime. It's not like tennis, football or hockey, which I played, and that was only in the evenings. Evenings anyway one has to play, and therefore we play the game. But the playing whole day is that cricket game, and therefore it was a stumbling block. And the attention for the engineering subject I bestowed after joining in engineering, though my orientation was in medicine. There are a few more interesting events I have faced in my career. One is about Mr. A.C. Subbareddy. He was then the Minister for Irrigation and Power. It was interesting because number of people have represented to him, and based upon what he received in the representations, he gave me some instructions as to the manner in which certain things have got to be done. But then I found them that those instructions cannot be complied with, and there is no way how I can do those things if I have to perform my duties in a disciplined manner. Then the things were not done. The people who approached me, I told them that this cannot be done. So they went and again represented to Mr. A.C. Subbareddy. See, you have given instructions, and he is your own subordinate officer in the irrigation department, and he has not done the works like that. He has not done the performance like that, and he doesn't seem to care for your instructions. What is the use of your being elected here in Nellore, and our grievances and our problems are not solved? Then he is a man of sound common sense and very good reasoning. He told them, if they have to be done, he would certainly do it. Because they cannot be done, they should not be done, he has not done. అప్పుడు అన్నారు వాళ్ళు, అయితే మీరెందుకండి మాకు, మేమే పోయి ఆయన దగ్గర చేయించుకోవచ్చు కదా, మీరెందుకు మాకు? So why you are there? We are coming to you for doing certain things and you are not doing that. So then he told, my dear friend, you have to see like this. We cannot operate the same manner to all the people in the department. Now he is a person who is doing good work. He is quickly completing all the works much ahead of time and in a good quality manner, which gives reputation to the government. And we need certain people like that to give credit to the government. And it will give in turn voting power. When we do good things, people realize that and people will vote for us. If we have to come to power, we have to respect such people and should not rub them on the wrong side. It will give credit to the government. And he somehow convinced them, and that problem was solved. Here I found an interesting personality who thinks that nothing should be done about certain officers and certain bad things should not be done at all. Then another person I met was, he is our irrigation minister in some other point of time, one Mr. Srinivas Reddy, both are no more. Then some people got represented to him saying that we want you to tell this to the chief engineer. Then at that point of time, one officer of international repute, he worked in the United Nations later on, Professor O.S. Reddy, he was there, because they are both from the same district, perhaps related also. So then in his presence only this discussion took place. And Srinivas Reddy, the minister, then told the people who are represented, if I tell this to Mr. Hanumant Rao, what will he think about me? Now here is a situation where the minister doesn't want to spoil his reputation and then doesn't want me to think anything against him. So therefore he is guarded. So there is another minister behaving in this manner. It is fortuitous, of course. Then on the top of it, I found Mr. N.T. Ramarao, the great chief minister. When I was laying down office to accept a World Bank assignment, I was taking leave of him because he gave me 1 year extension for my service, and before the expiry of that extension, I had to go because the World Bank assignment has come. So when I was leaving his presence and taking leave of him, then he asked me, హనుమంతరావు గారు, ఇన్నేళ్లుగా ఎప్పుడైనా మిమ్మల్ని ఇలా చేయమండి, ఇలా నాకు చేసి పెట్టండి అని ఎప్పుడన్నా అడిగానా? So that is what he means was, in the entire service of your 3 years, as engineer-in-chief, did I at any time ask you for anything to be done in any particular manner? And there were so many people around him. That is, the chief secretary was there and so many other officials were there. And then I told him, sir, it is a salutary experience for me. In fact, the confidence which he reposed on me is all being praised also at Delhi. Could this be done by a state government like that? And such was the honesty and the straightforwardness with which you have worked, and everybody is appreciative of it. And I gave him a compliment. So here, a chief minister wanted to seek for my compliment as I was leaving, which normally they don't, unless he is a great person, they won't usually do that. So these are all the interesting incidents. I now would like to talk on my childhood and student days, including college and engineering college. My elementary school was entirely in my native place called Kullur, that is ancestral native place. Though of course I was born in Pedapuram in East Godavari district, I have not claimed that as my native place, because it was only incidental that my maternal grandfather was there when my mother went there for delivery. So actually Pedapuram is not associated in any other manner. So the ancestral native place was in Kulluru, that is in Nellore district, west of Nellore, about 60 kilometers, and it is almost on the bank of Penna river. Elementary education was spent in the Kulluru Jilla Board High School. Now presently it is Jilla Parishad. They used to call that as District Board, I think, District Board High School. It's now Jilla Parishad. So these formative days, they are very important in any individual's life. The way how we have lived there in a surrounding which is so primitive from the present day standards. We don't have a bathroom, we don't have a latrine, we don't have running water, nothing of that sort. It is only a stove or a kattila poyi, not even boggula poyi. So that type of living. So the all the whole village was like that. It's not only we, the whole village was like that. And the economy of the village is very interesting to note now at the later period. There was no need for any material to come from outside to the village except for cotton yarn. They used to prepare the handloom type of saris and dhotis, towels and all that sort of thing. And there was not even import of material for Deepavali festival. We used to prepare our own crackers, our own rolu rokali, what they call it, with the powder, gunpowder and other combination to be mixed and then put, and it will give a tremendous sound. And also certain other gadgets which we used to prepare ourselves, and there was no import of that also. And for playing games, we used to manufacture our own ball. That is out of the rubbish of cloth cutting pieces. We have some tailor shops there. So they have a lot of pieces of cloth, and those pieces we wind round a small stone, neatly packed it and cover it with a small cloth and then stitch it. So we know how to stitch it also. That is, a ball is prepared. It is to be little soft. But if we want to have a hard ball, we have to take threads out of that little pieces of cloth. We used to painstakingly take those threads, and those threads we used to wind round the small stone. And that ball prepared out of such cotton yarn is to be hard. So this hard ball is used also at times. So, and then for the stick and all that we used to prepare ourselves. So it was so self-reliant, and it was a very challenging atmosphere in the sense that we are self-made. All the village is self-made in the sense that they do everything on their own. They don't depend upon outside help much. And any distance has to be walked There were no buses in the earlier times. And our village also is not connected to the bus route, or bus doesn't come to our village even at a later date also. So that was the situation. And we had certain fields or lands, cultivated lands, on the other side of Pennar River, which is about 28 kilometers from Kulluru. So we have to start very early in the morning. Myself and my father, we used to go for a visit to the lands. Whenever we used to go, we used to leave the house at 4 o'clock in the morning and reach there before midday. Because in the hot summer we were there for holidays. In the hot summer we can't walk on the sand of Pennar. So it has to be negotiated when it is cool, like at about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. So we used to walk this 28 kilometers. And then again come back 28 kilometers. En route we have places where we halt for breakfast and things like that. So these are all the experiences associated with the village. My village teacher, one Annamaya, when we met later on when I was studying in the engineering college, we went there for summer vacation. So he was putting questions to me. Are Hanumantrao, will you ever become executive engineer before you retire? Because he thought that executive engineer was a very high post, because at that level of village, the executive engineer is a very high post. I then told him there is a level called superintendent engineer, then again a chief engineer. So there is every chance that I can become a chief engineer. Who is it? He was pleasantly surprised. And there used to be one Penchal Narasimha Rao, highly disciplinarian. And he used to inculcate discipline among the students. The wonder is, they are all prepared to work in villages. They are all brilliant students, brilliant teachers. And brilliant teachers were available in the villages. And the headmaster was an English teacher. And he is respected by the whole village, because anybody talking English is considered as something superior, by far superior. And there used to be games teacher, John, by name John. He is a converted Christian from scheduled caste. Because he takes also some classes, my grandmother and others used to insist, when we come back from the school, that we have to leave our dress and wear a different shirt and a pant or a knicker. So there were separate clothes for attending the school, not by way of uniform, but by way of a rigorous custom there, that the Christians, if they are there, or they are considered as scheduled caste, and when scheduled caste person is taking a class, because we touch him or we get associated, we get contaminated. That is the feeling which the villagers were having earlier. So these were the conditions when we studied the elementary school. Then afterwards, my study in the middle school was in Georgetown, Madras, when father went there to work on a job. And that was very interesting. From the lack of English basic knowledge, that was a very high English knowledge. There the second form which I joined, that is the 7th class, they used to have 4 subjects in English. First of all, to understand those subjects was very difficult for me. I never understood what is prose, what is poetry, what is grammar, what is composition. So these four periods and all that was there in English. Whereas in the elementary school in Kullur, we used to have only basic knowledge of alphabets and a few words. So from there we have to jump to this level. So that was a sort of a shocking type, but we got adjusted to in a matter of a few months. Then with a hard training, my father used to take special pains to teach English to me, because they made an elevation in the sense they jumped up on class for me, because that school does not have the first form. So it starts from second form only.